Hello everybody, hope you're doing okay. Welcome to a field near Dunsfold. I've got some sheep behind us, but I've actually come here today not to look at sheep, but look at the Takumi Sen 9. Perhaps the narrowest shoe on the market, at least in the racing category. So that should suit me well, shouldn't it? It's not actually my first run of these, I got them last week. I've got a session tonight, 8 minutes at 10k speed, followed by 15,400. So what I think I will try and do is do the first 8 minutes in the Sen 9s and then over to the Adios 8, because I want to sort of see how they fare. Because the Adios 8 has so far been the best of the Boston 12 Adios 8 Takumi Sen 9. It's a shoe that I think is just designed for fast road running, so even like doing a warm-up here didn't feel great. It felt a bit unstable, just sort of plodding along, but I'm feeling a bit tired tonight, so I'm going to see how I go. Look at the shoes here. It is quite narrow here on my midfoot. You can see that I haven't got the tongues touching for a change, but there's quite a lot of volume actually sort of above the toes, which is quite nice. So I think so when the feet will get warmer, then it should be okay. Bit of padding around there. I know Andy FOD runner said that he thought these shoes were a bit short, if anything, with a thumb width there, a good thumb width. If anything, I feel like they're sort of slightly too long, if anything, but I certainly wouldn't want to go down any sizes having got the elusive 13.5. I'll link up to Andy's video, who's sort of going into more depth in the tack and that, but it's the first two pairs of UK 13.5 we've seen in the Takumi Sen 9. They did start doing them in the 8, but I thought at full price I'd rather just sort of wait for the 9. Had to pay full price for these, £170, so not great really. I mean, it's a bit of the sort of Adidas sort of, answer to the Street Fly. These are somewhat heavier. They're about the same weight as the Vaporfly 3 for me, so that sort of makes it a bit something and nothing, because they are lower stack. Doesn't feel quite as sort of super shoe-ish, although they are a super shoe compared to sort of like the Adios 8 and the Boston 12 for sure, which isn't really a racing shoe at all. I'll talk about that another time. Anyway, one stride and I think I need to get going. Okay, 8 minutes done. That sort of feels like it was quite hard work already. I think I just got really tired legs. I did a 13.5 mile run in the Adios 8 on Sunday. Maybe that was a bit too much in the heat, but yeah, it is what it is. It's just a session. So now we've got 15.4s. I've mapped out a little loop, which I think is about 400 meters, so I have to adapt. It's very near the car and the pub though, so stop off for refreshments. So the Sen 9, yeah, I mean, I could feel the lightness. I feel a bit of my toes a bit in these. You certainly feel that they are that lower stack. Quite firm as well. Not firm like an old school racing flat, but just sort of feel the toes. I can feel my sort of ground a bit more. Mind you, I think it's always a bit like that for me through my toes, but yeah, I mean, I think it's definitely a shoe so far that I've found is lending itself to short, sharp, fast efforts, which is, to be fair, what it's designed for. If reviewers say that you can take it out for a plod at sort of your marathon pace or slower, well, yeah, I'm sure you can, but it's not really the ideal shoe for that, I don't think. Not really designed for that. Really designed to sort of get you going, I think. Anyway, right, how long have I got? Another minute before this first rep's out. Perhaps an example of wilding here, but I'm not actually going to be running through this, hopefully, around the edge of it. So yeah, is it like that where you are? I've been on 2 public footpaths in the last couple of runs, and they've been absolutely nettle fests after about 50 yards from the gate. So if you see my legs, they do like a bit of a sorry state for sore eyes, with lots of cuts and stuff. But yeah, nothing at a bit of a quick brush up and brush would soon sort out. Right, I've got 30 seconds. That's not very generous. It's very different for me to do these sort of tempo runs, which feel more like flat out, to be honest, before the start of a session. So yeah, it's a good little test for sure. I thought at this point it might be interesting to interject with a bit of stats. So here's the route of where I did, basically on the main road through Dunsfold, and this little loop here near the Sun Inn pub. And then there is the Dunsfold test track for Top Gear, so quite close as the crow flies for sure. So the 8 minute rep started here at the top, the north of Dunsfold, coming back into it and just coming back where I parked my car here. So I ended up doing that at a average pace of 6:13, which was slightly disappointing. I was feeling a bit tired, but maybe that was a bit of an exaggerated warm-up. Heart rate wasn't very high at all. Every average 134, and he got to a maximum of 140. So if we look at the summary of all the reps, so then I did 15 reps, 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7
the first 7 reps in the Sen 9, and then the 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8. Yeah, the remaining 8 in the Adios 8, so good symmetry there. And you can see actually my heart rate, normally you expect it to drift up quite a lot. It didn't seem to drift up that much this time. What I'm trying to look for here, if there's any sort of patterns between using the Sen 9 and the Adios 8, and it's not really obvious from just these graphs that there is. If we have a look at the splits, which I think is also quite interesting. So I was doing basically 400 meter reps, although I put it at 0.25 on my Garmin. I was actually following a workout, so all the distances and the rest were taken care of for me. I just had to keep running until it beeped up at 0.25. So I started here, you can see at 1 minute 29.8 in the Sen 9, and we went up to the first 7 with it. So the first rep was the 8-minute interval, so the first 2 to 8 here were the Sen 9. So if anything, I would say that I was actually slightly slower in the Sen 9. Whether that's because I was sort of trying a bit harder later on. You can see at the end here, 125, 126, 125, even a 123. So all these ones in the Adios, I think once I've sort of got into them, were actually faster. I don't know whether it's partly because the last 4 here were a different direction. It's exactly the same loop, but I started off like in a quicker format, so I went on the main road and then turned right onto a country lane. I'll put a video right at the end of actually me following my route. But yeah, I mean, I think certainly the takeaway from this is that without getting too sort of worried about times, that certainly the Adios 8 and the Sen 9, no noticeable difference in performance for me. I mean, yeah, my heart rate was creeping up slightly towards the end, but not really significantly so. You know, it got to 150, looks like maximum there, and then 148 at the end of that one. It's interesting how sometimes the heart rate gets higher in rest because it's sort of still rising gradually after you've finished interval. But I think the takeaway from this is the Adios 8 is working quite well for me, and it always was my race shoe, so good to see that heritage continuing. So we go back to the video and I'll talk you through the reps and some more general chat about how I found all the shoes.
Okay, 2 down. I'm not very worried about the pace here. It's quite a sharp little circuit, and it feels like I'm actually working already harder than the 10k bit, although maybe not going faster. It's just the cumulative fatigue today, but these sessions really do help, don't they? Okay, 6 down. 15 seems a long time, but I'm going to do one more in the Sen 9s, swap over to the Adios 8, see how we can fill in them. Okay, first run in the Adios 8. Instantly felt like it was more tippy forward. I think it was the highest stack. I think it's 8 mil stack in this, and about 6 in the Takumi Sen. Wider base for sure, but still nicely fitting. I think I was about the same time with a rush to change the shoe, so let's see how it is on the next one. Yeah, just a bit more shoe on foot, a bit heavier, but a bit more tippy upper, so in a way worked quite nicely. Let's see how the rest of them go. Yeah, not too bad. I think the session's harder than the shoe choice, but it's certainly the Adios 8 will do for your reps for sure. Not sure I'd wear either of these 2 shoes at a race price. Just not really favoured over the Vaporfly. No difference in weight for the Sen 9 to the Vaporflies there, so you kind of feel like you're getting a shoe that's sort of less stacked for the same weight. So something's compromised, isn't it? Okay, I think it's 2 more to go. I feel like I'm getting faster actually. Well, I think I'm putting more effort. I reverse the direction, which kind of helps because you do the main road bit, then the side lane, country lane bit, and then only have the twisty bit at the end. And right turns perhaps easier in a way with this sort of flow. Right, I'll do one more of them, and then I think I'll call it quits. Okay, I miscounted. Fortunately, that was the last one, so I don't think there's much light to talk about any shoes, but see if I go over there. I've got my GoPro Lite here, which may allow us to say something. So I hope you've got enough light here on this cricket pitch to do a good point, bad point. The good point is that they're the lightest of the Adizero shoes at 255 grams. The bad point is that even though they're only a 33mm stack, they're exactly the same weight for me as a Vaporfly 3, and these are actually 5 grams heavier than a Vaporfly 1. So in that sense, you feel like you're getting a less shoe. But I suppose you are also getting, a good point is that these are only £170 at retail. The bad point perhaps is you can't get any discounts. Because they're Adidas shoes, you always feel like you're paying too much for them, because in the past they've been very generous and allowing all these 30-35% discounts to work. I think they've got now a rise to it, which kind of backfires a bit, because now people just say, oh well, don't buy this yet, because in about a few months' time they'll be like half price, and they probably will be, because they do rather churn them out. And in a way, it's kind of odd having this shoe as well as the Adios 8, but I do feel they do serve different purposes. When I was doing the end of the reps there, I felt like, because it was an 8mm stack in the Adios, even though it's a lower stack and slightly heavier and slightly wider base, just feel like it was a bit more sort of natural. It's a shoe that I've done a marathon in the past. So this one, it felt quite sort of, I don't know, a bit slappy, a bit sort of firmer, and I felt my toes a bit through here. It does certainly still feel fast, and you can certainly feel that the reduced weight, but not sort of like this wow factor you get in the Vaporflies. I think because of the lower stack, you feel like you're having to do quite a lot of work here yourself and maintain the form, because I don't feel you're getting too much sort of pop from it, because the foam's quite sort of firm. I think the Lightstrike Pro in this sort of thickness of it doesn't really sort of lend itself quite to sort of like the bounce and bounce off, landing and bounce off you perhaps think of in the Zoom X. And the good point, it's quite a narrow fit. It's probably the narrowest of all the shoes I've got. I've had to pull the laces in a bit, but it does actually come out quite sort of high at the front here. So I feel like I've got a lot of room over my toes, which is nice. And I did feel like I had a good thumb weight. I could sort of find it odd a bit that Andy said they were slightly, Andy Rayner, FOT runner, said they were slightly too short. I know his shoes are actually the same size as mine, but his feet are actually 3mm longer. I think mine are 302mm and his are 305. And 305 is right on the limit of what Adidas recommend for a UK 13.5, which is exactly the same as the UK 13 in a Nike. So don't think that because I've got a 13.5 in this one, I've got a bigger size than the 13 in a Nike or Saucony. They are basically the same shoe. They're 32 centimetres long or US 14. The outsole, well, it's a good point. It's the traditional Continental. Not really much to say about it. I mean, on a dry summer's evening on a flat road, well, people do seem to get very excited about outsoles. I think, sometimes I feel that sometimes some runners must sort of fall over at every corner because forever obsessing about how good an outsole is. I mean, yeah, if you keep falling over in a shoe, then, well, maybe it's not so great. But, yeah, I mean, I haven't fallen over a shoe for quite a long time. And if you do fall over in a shoe, it's because you hit something. And then, well, outsoles are not going to help then if you hit sort of a pothole or a twig in the thing. So yeah, I just don't quite understand why people get so excited about outsoles. These do have the rod, so I suppose it's sort of like Adidas's kind of sort of version of the carbon plates. I mean, it's sort of a fairly stiff shoe. There's a bit of bend there, to be honest. So I suppose it does sort of, it feels like you're trying to get up on your toes, but as I said, I feel like I was more up on my toes in the Adios 8. It just felt I was sort of tipped forward a bit with that higher drop. The upper, I wouldn't say it's fairly breathable, but it's not quite as breathable as the Adios 8. I think if they really wanted to save weight, they could actually reduce this from a sort of a plasticky type material to almost like a mesh. So I'm not quite sure what the thinking is here. Maybe it's just an older version. I mean, this shoe was meant to have come out sort of about now, and it suddenly landed, didn't it, last Christmas, and it took Andy and me all this time until now to actually find one in a 13.5. So I'm glad I've tried it out, but I mean, I got the 8 and a 12.5, and I got that at a big discount, and I felt like that was a good sort of price for it. For this one, I'm thinking, well, why is it £50 more than, say, the Street Fly? Don't think, as I said, I would be wanting to race it. I mean, obviously you could race in this and it would be ideal for 5k racing, but I mean, me now as a sort of 18-minute 5k runner, I just don't think I'm fast enough to really broaden a shoe like this, and I think I actually benefit more from that slightly more protection, as the Nick from the Run Testers always like to say, in a shoe, even in a 5k, that last mile when your legs are starting to go, just sort of feel like I'm sort of bouncing along. In this one, in this mile one, I kind of feel like I'm sort of reaching for it at the end a bit. But yeah, it's a good shoe, but in a way, it's kind of almost surplus to requirements, I think. Unless you are an elite runner, or you prefer really sort of low stack, sort of minimalist type shoes. But it's not really a minimalist shoe, is it? I mean, if anything, I would say the Adios 8, even though it's a bit heavier, is actually more minimalist. It's a bit more lower to the ground, and it feels like you've just got a bit more connection there. So I think of the 3 shoes that I've got, Adios 8, Boston 12, and the Takumi Sen 9, I'm kind of liking the Adios 8 most. I think partly because it's the cheapest, so you kind of feel like you've got the best value for your money, but partly because it feels like the most sort of natural shoe for me, because maybe that's because it's got the highest drop. I mean, Adios used to be about 10 and now 8, but I don't really notice much difference between an 8 and a 10. But when it gets to a 6, even though it's in a super foam, I do tend to start to notice that more. And although it wasn't that noticeable, I just do think it's a factor. If anything, I felt like it was less of an issue in the Adios Pro 3, but maybe that was just more sponge there and you feel like you were bouncing along more. I think this is quite a specialist shoe, and I know if you've got like a wider foot and you can't get in this, I don't think you're really missing too much other than saving £170. But yeah, I mean, don't think this is, by not having this shoe, you're suddenly going to be missing out on your PBs. I think these days we're seeing so many shoes in the carbon plated racing market that, you know, whatever people you like, and I think a lot of people are now going off Nike principally because I think they wanted to try other ones. But although when you get to races, you still see a lot of Nike ones. A lot of shoe tubers, I think, don't like Nike because Nike don't tend to send shoes out for review, etc. So people have to buy them themselves, and then they get annoyed about that. And yeah, so someone like me who has to buy their own shoes, well, I don't really care less. I'll just buy what I want to buy. And yeah, so I mean, this is certainly a shoe that I'm glad I bought. It does sort of suit me, but I think I'm going to reserve it for sessions like tonight when it's just sort of like a fast blowout. Anyway, so I hope you found this interesting, and more to the point, I hope you can even still see me. Like and subscribe on that, and see you on the next one then. Bye. Okay, I think before it gets too dark, I'll take you around on a POV view of my route. There's a pub there because the sun's something. Right, I need to get going. Right, speed bump there, negotiated. Speed bump there, feels like steeplechase. Speed bump there. Mini piece of gravel here. And we take a sharp left after these 2 stakes here. Someone's driveway, really. Right, now we've got a flat bit. Back to the main road. Stretch out here. Wind into my face though. Got Dunsfold cricket pitch up ahead. Going sharp left now. And at the junction we finish.